Hi, I'm Steve McCord, Cattaraugus County Director of Veteran Services, and this is Our Veterans, Their Stories, preserving our heroes' stories, one story at a time.
I was born just outside of Columbus, Georgia, on a 500-acre farm. When I was 16, I went into the Georgia National Guard. They found out I was too young and gave me a discharge. My dad went down with me and certified that I was 17. I wasn't. And I went into the Navy, went to the Seabee School, just getting ready to leave it. And 5 of us got orders to report to Camp Pendleton, California for advanced infantry training. I was one of the 5. We left there and went over to Coronado Island. That's on the side of San Diego. And went to Amtrak. That's the track vehicle personnel carrier. You run off the ship and take off in floats, and made the Incheon landing there. I was with the 1st Marine Division all the way up to the Chinese border. And 3 major combats. In fact, the first one was Heartbreak Ridge. The second was Cho Sin Reservoir. And the third one was when we pushed the Chinese back into China.
Tell me about the Chosin Reservoir. What was that like?
Well, it was so cold, it's hard to remember. We went in there. See, we had a battalion that has 4 companies. My company was on the far right. And we didn't really get into that real heavy firing there. The guys in the middle and the other side got into high sport. But I got in enough I didn't want any more.
Okay. And then you after Chosin, you pushed the Chinese back up to the border?
No, we fought our way up there, pushing the Chinese. Yeah.
Okay.
I had my 17th and 18th birthdays in combat. Just after I came out of Korea, I was in Japan, went down with hepatitis, and 3 months later they couldn't cure me there. They moved me to Vallejo, California Naval Hospital. And finally, after 3 months there, they got us well, and I went aboard a ship for wanting to go deep sea ship for my last part. I went aboard the USS Lenawee, AP-195, and our sister ship was AP-196. And so we did that a while, and then we got orders, the ship to go between the National Chinese and the Communist Chinese. So we went in, the destroyer led the way in between the island and the mainland. The mainland was about a mile away. Destroyer went in, heavy cruiser went in, our 2 ships went in, another destroyer, and then the battleship Mo, and then another destroyer. And what we had to do to my ship is got separate cargo areas. We had to cut holes so they could go from one to the other. And we went down to Kilo and Formosa, dropped them off, went up and loaded up another load. And battleship Mo and all of them let us in again. They've got that 16-inch round that'll fly 20 miles, only about a mile over there to where the Chinese were. So it'd be like shooting ducks. Anyway, we got out, and my ship was the last one out. We had this big spool of wire on the stern, and it was playing out. And we got about a quarter mile or so out from it, and they pushed the plunger, and all of the houses and everything on the village went up. You could plant corn. So that's where I got the China Service Medal from.
Okay.
It's a World War II medal, but they gave it to all of us. Well, what I did is I got discharged from the Korean situation. I went into the Army. Got married first. We married about 4 weeks. I went into the Army. Got to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I had my uniform on with ribbons, and this master sergeant says, "You're a Korean War veteran?" I, "Yes." "Where'd you train?" I told him. He said, "Well, you're not going to go to basic." I said, "The Army says I have to." He said, "Read my lips, you're not going through basic. You're going to ride around with my Jeep." So came time to throw grenades. He handed me grenades, says, "Go out there and throw that thing one time." Came back and gave me 100%. Map reading time, all the guys had to map read through the woods. He handed me a compass, says, "Go out behind that big tree over there, stay there about 10, 15 minutes and come back." 100% on map reading. That's how I went through. Because I'd done all of that with the Marine Corps Advanced Infantry Training. So, and also going through Navy Basic.
And what was your MOS in the Army?
Well, I had several.
Okay.
The main one was I was in Harborcraft. And I don't know what now I can't remember what it was. And I was sent to Fort Eustis, Virginia, to the Harborcraft Training School. Fort Eustis is Transportation Corps run.
Right.
And I taught in the classrooms and also taught out on the water, teaching them how to operate the boats. And then from there I went to France. And I was in the 81st Boat Company in France. And there I made sergeant there, E5 sergeant. And what our job task was there, if it came to the point where everybody had to be evacuated south, we would go down to the beaches in Spain, set up a tent city, mess halls, everything. And then all of the dependents would be sent down there, and they have places to sleep and all while they're waiting aboard the ship back to the States. So to do part of that, we had to go out and do open water training. So we trained it up the South Beach where the invasion from England to France was, and did about a week's worth of their landing in the surf up there. I mean, he had some big surf because it's the English Channel. So we stayed there about a week, week and a half, and then went all the way at sea back down to our base.
And then where'd you go after France?
After France, I went back to Fort Eustis, Virginia. Now I got promoted to Staff Sergeant E6. And at Fort Eustis, I was teaching in the basic course, plus I taught in the advanced course. The advanced course is 120 footers up to 159 footers. The basic course is about an 18 to 20 foot twin engine. And did you see Mr. Roberts' movie?
Yes.
Well, the freight ship that we had, that was a 159 footer, was the exact same thing. Okay. And what we'd do is we taught them in the classrooms, and then once a month we'd go out to Puerto Rico and we'd teach them star sightings and sun sightings at night, so they knew how to navigate with a sextant. And we'd be in the wheelhouse with them when they were doing their thing. So, and I did that until 1962. And I met a guy that made Buck Sergeant with me, E4. He's coming along there with with the W01 ribbons on, and his rank. And I saluted him, then I recognized him. I said, "How'd you get the award?" He said, "Well, I went through flight school, and I just got back from Vietnam." So he says, "Why don't you go up and put in for it?" One of my men just turned it down. My wife didn't know anything about it. I put in to go to flight school. And about 4 or 5 months later, my orders came down to report to Fort Walters, Texas, to flight school. But meanwhile, after I got the record to go, all of these pilots that were at Fort Eustis, Vietnam pilots and all, they started taking me out every evening after I got off work and give me about an hour to an hour and a half of bootleg time in the same type that I would be flying at Fort Walters. So my first day at basic in Fort Walters, I had a civilian trainer, was an ex-Vietnam guy. He was first lieutenant and got out and went to work for the airlines there. And he said, we're going to go out between the 500-yard line and the 400-yard line. I'm going to teach you how to hover. I didn't say anything. I'd already done 56 hours of that. So we got out there, and he sat down, picked it up, did a clear and turn, set it back down. He said, now you try one, and I'll be lightly on the controls. I said, why don't you stay off controls and let me do it? So I picked it up to a hover, did my clear and turn, cut the throttle, set it down in a hover and auto rotation. He looked at me and he says, you SOB, how much bootleg time do you have? I said, well, sir, I have 56 hours. He said, that's all you need to get through primary and advanced here. So I had he said, what all you know how to do? And I started hovering auto rotation, hovering, takeoff, downwind, base leg, normal approach, steep approach, straight in auto rotation from 500 feet down without your engine, and then the 180 auto rotation where you do the same thing. He said, you've done everything in primary. I said, yeah, I'm just about everything in the advanced course too. So we got along great. So
And then after that, you ended up in Vietnam?
I went to the 11th Air Assault Division at Fort Benning, Georgia. That's the forerunner of the CAF going back to get their colors back.
Okay.
And I flew with the 227th A Company, flying the H-34s. That's a cargo helicopter with a 9-cylinder radial engine in front, 4-ton maximum lift. I flew those. Had been less than 3 weeks, and we went out to Savannah to Fort Stewart, to the edge of the Okefenokee. Anyway, I got there and been there about 2 days, and my company commander called me and said, Bob, I want you to fly down to Savannah Beach and get a load of 1x5s because it's real soupy there, and we had in front of each tent was all boggy. And he said, Mr. Litt will be flying with you as your co-pilot. Well, Litt was in the part of flight school I was in. I graduated first in my class in flight school at Walters and second academically, and then graduated first in my class at Dothan at the training base there for advanced training. So when I got in the helicopter to go down, we went and landed on Savannah Beach, and they put 16-foot 1x5s in the cargo hold. It's inside the aircraft. And we just got back about 15 minutes back from there at 100 feet, so I knew I was clearing the highest trees. And we ran into a fog bank. I mean, you couldn't see anything. And Louis said, Bob, let's go back. I looked at him, I said, where in the hell do you think we're coming from with this fog? It's coming off the ocean. So I climbed to 500 feet. I knew that was higher than the highest antennas down there. Got on my phone and, my two-tone and talked to home base. I said, look, I'm inadvertently in the fog. I'm at 500 feet. I know I'm heading generally in the way of back to base camp. What I need you to do is key your mic 20 seconds and then hold it and then let it go, and then so every 20 seconds what he's doing, Because on H-34 they had a compass about the size of a golf ball. And that was your navigation aid and everything. And to know that you're flying toward your destination, had a little coffee grinder like thing, and it's when you're outside of your boundary, they had a squeak and a squawk and all that stuff, so you move back in the next time. And you fly with it in a null. In other words, you turn it till you have no sound, and then you're on course. So flew back. Company commander called me in the next day and said, "Bob, I heard you had pretty good fun yesterday." I said, "Yes, sir, I did. I enjoyed it." So he said, "Tell you what, as soon as we get back to Fort Benning, you're going to Dothan to take instrument course, 8 weeks instrument course." See, I could fly it already, but it wasn't legal. So then I got back from that, and I went out with a Chief Warrant Officer W. named Frank Price, who was from Tennessee. And he said, "You were instructor, weren't you?" I said, "Yeah." I told him all of my instructing, where I did it. He said, "Do you know enough to think you could teach me how to fly this?" I said, "I'm sure I could." So first day I was doing out with him after I got back from instrument school, teaching him how to do the approaches and going into confined areas and everything. He went back and told the company commander about it. He said, "Bob, tomorrow pack your bags. You're going down to Dothan to advanced school down there for instructor pilot school." Those two, normally you have to wait at 3 to 4 years before you qualify for either one of them. I hadn't been out flying from Fort Rucker, but maybe 4 weeks maximum, plus, the training. So when I made W3 warrant, I got W3 ahead of all my classmates. To fly the general, I had to have a top secret crypto clearance. That's the highest you can get. And then be at least 5,000 hours flying time, at least 50 hours in the suit flying on instruments, and have at least 2,000 hours of instructor pilot time, because I'm going to teach him how to fly. So very first day, fog was right on top. We were about halfway up a mountain, and on K, Vietnam. And we were sitting out there, and he said, "Bob, I need to get to the front, to our base camp out on the Bongside Plains." I said, "We're going, sir." He said, "How are we going to do that?" I said, "Well, you're going to make an instrument takeoff." He looked at me and, "What is an instrument takeoff?" I told him all about it. I said, "First of all, let me tell you what this does. That's your cycling. You go forward, side to side, backwards, and you can take off any of those directions." I said, "Now another thing you can do there, when you want to take off, you just think about moving forward, and your reaction in your hand will actually start moving forward." I said, "This one over here has 3 names to it: pitch, power to your blades. In other words, putting lift in your blades." So he says, "How am I going to do this instrument takeoff?" I said, "Well, I'm going to be on the controls with you. I want you to take off from a hover just like I told you." I said, "When it starts moving faster, you're going to go through translational lift." Well, like that. And then he climbed on out. We broke out of the fog at 6,000 something feet. And then had to go out over the ocean. And what we did is I called the towers out there. And it was the English. They had Air Force towers. And told them I wanted to make a GCA. In other words, ground controlled approach. And I told them why. And this brigadier general, he's general select. He hadn't made brigadier yet. He says, "Bob, what is a GCA?" I said, "Well, that's when you don't have a compass. You're looking at your instrument to read them, to keep from getting a fixation on any one of them, which puts you into vertigo." So I said, I'll be with you on the controls lightly. And he said, they're going to give you an instruction. You follow the radio instruction. A couple of seconds later, they call from the radio down to the English and says, turn right 90 degrees. I reached over and turned his compass off. It's a radiomagnetic compass. Now he can't steer by that. So they said, turn right 90 degrees. So he started turning right, and I said, right about there. Stopped. We came back from Tyre, says Roger, and we used his call sign, Roger Cottonmouth 6. He lived up to that. But anyway, they said, turn back to the original heading. And I said, that's about it, sir. They got us into base leg, said, start your rate of descent. I told him like this, so he pushed down on it, pushed too hard, and we were going below the glide slope. The tower says, Copperhead says, you're going below the glide slope, adjust your rate of descent. And I told him like this, so he pulled up on it, puts a little lift in the blades. We broke out at 80 feet, then made our landing. I said, nurse, sir, I've got to talk about something else with you. If you're flying instruments in the States, you have to call your nearest center, like Jacksonville Center for Fort Benning in that area. Right. And they'll give you a flight altitude and speed to fly. And the only way you can leave that is to call them that you've broken out of the fog, or if they try to call you and you don't have any radio, you lost radio contact, you go on to your home destination and start your approach. You have to stop at 200 feet, fly out of it. He said, why is that? I said, well, that's the FAA regulations. You can't go below 200 feet without seeing the runway. And that's for fixed wing coming in, because they have to have time to get it in shape. But anyway, he understood that. He said, but why can we stop here? I said, well, let me give you an example. You're flying in the soup. You fly through a small clearing area. You get shot down. You'll be back in the soup before they even realize it almost. I said, then you cut the throttle and you go down, and you can go all the way to the ground if you want to. Normally, you'll break out at 18 to 20 feet and give you time to flare and set it down. So he, okay with that. So I flew him about 10 and a half months. Got him his wings, got him instrument rated. And then when the Tet-68, that's when the North Vietnamese came down and hit every Army base in the whole of South Vietnam at one time. They'd sneaked enough people to do that. And the old imperial city of Hue, that was the capital of both before, had a wall of city around it about 35 foot high, and then a moat. And the North Vietnamese owned all but 3 city blocks of it. We had 2,500 Marines in there and a whole division of Vietnamese, and that's four battalions, four platoons each company. So they had a lot of men in there. And my job every day was to take the general in, land it in that 3 city block area. Then he'd talk to the people there, the Marines and South Vietnamese, on retaking the city. Meanwhile, I would load up with wounded Marines in any room I had left to take Vietnamese and fly the gauntlet back out. And we called it a gauntlet because NVA owned a 5-mile area around it. Well, what I'd do before I'd start in there, and I did it from day one until I never flew in it again, put my nose in my skids, so my skids is actually touching the rice stops. In other words, I'm about that far off the ground doing 120 knots, about 140 miles an hour. And so the aircraft is like that. And they're shooting at me and hitting the tail boom. And tail boom, all it's got is an inch thick pipe that the tail rotor drive chain turns the tail rotor, your directional control.
This is small arms fire?
Mm-hmm.
Small arms?
Small arm fire. In fact, it got so many hits, they patch it every night with a little patch. And then zinc chromite, it was this yellow kind of paint. They got to calling the General's aircraft Old Yaller, like the movie. I was assigned to the White Knight 8, White Knights platoon. It's 4 platoons of aircraft. 2 platoons of them were gunships. And that was before the Cobra came out. They got the name Cobra from our gunships. We had 48 rockets on each side, a 5-barrel minigun, and then a grenade chunker in the nose that threw one out, pretty good size. And they would come out and make sure you get out of the combat assaults good and all. Well, when I got shot down, it was 6:01 in the evening. I had been on an ash and trash run all since 6 in the morning. And what that's called is going each one of the special forces camps where they're embedded in with South Vietnamese and drop off whatever they needed, like kerosene, milk, ammo, rifles, whatever. And so I did that, and I'd just finished up. I'd flown it a lot of times, but just finished up landing down in the south end of Vietnam. It's all mangrove swamps, and that is where the most concentrated of the communists were. Well, I climbed out, was at 6,300 feet outside a small armed range. Just leaning back to relax, and boom, my engine went to zero. I turned and looking for a place to land into the wind. There wasn't one. Way out on the horizon was a clearing. And the way I got out there, because when you fall in, your blades speed up. Pull in pitch and take it a little further. Speed up. And when I got to the tree line, I just barely limped over that. Got down to the bottom, put it in a flare while the wind was blowing on us. Couldn't get it stopped. And I knew I was going to hit the water wrong, so I rolled it level and let it down. And what happened when it landed so hard, I got the 2 compression fractures and it broke the tail boom off. It actually broke. Hard landing. And any landing you land and live from it's okay.
Were you by yourself? Or
No, I had a co-pilot, left door gunner, 25th Infantry Division trained door gunner, and then my crew chief was on an M60. The gunner was on an M60, and I had an M60 that I would use. Excuse me. So what we did is we got out one here, made a box around the aircraft. I cough every once in a while. So we got out, and this lieutenant says, "Bob, what am I going to do?" I shoot your GD weapon. He threw an AR-15 up, went brrr, put another brrr, he threw him, and he's out of ammo. He said, what am I going to do now? I said, "You're going to be the ammo bearer. You're going to jump in the bird and be a target while you're doing it." This is a first lieutenant infantry asking a W1 warrant officer what he's supposed to do. So anyway, he'd run through and bring one of us, and on my side where he was up in front, I went to the middle so I could cover both front and rear. I was standing there and I saw a Vietnamese stand up. I saw his muzzle blast and felt it hit me. Knocked me to my knees. I kept my M60 in my hand. I stood back up, and when he stood back up again, I let go with a solid burst. It fires 760 rounds a minute. They found him, he had 7 holes in him. My home base, from there back to home base, with a loaded gunship, is minimum 35 minutes. Well, full dark would be 6:29. And ironic to it, I soloed at Fort Walters on the 17th of December, and I got shot down on the 17th of December. But anyway, we figured, well, we're going to have to stay here and fight these people all night long, try to live. I heard, you know, the sound they make. I don't know if you know it, but that's the tip of the blades going to compressibility, like the sonic sound. So anyway, the first two came down firing rockets. They're miniguns on each side and throwing grenades. As they starburst out, the second pair came in with medevac right between them. By the time they starburst out, all of us were in the aircraft. I ran over and I couldn't get in. They pulled me in, gave me a shot of morphine there about that size. I could have flown back without a helicopter. I mean, that is a high. Anyway, got to the aid station, and first thing the flight surgeon said, he was a captain, he said, "Bob, you may never walk again." I said, "Sir, I'm going to walk tonight if I have to go in the men's room." He said, "No, you can't." I said, "Well, you hide and watch me." I got up to walk in there, and I had tears running down my cheeks. Boy, it was painful. So the next day, you've seen the old movies of the back brace where you had aluminum tubes, a pad here and a pad here and one in your back. They fit me one of those, and I wore it until I was out of the Army Hospital in Washington, D.C. area. The 13 of us left our ward because the Bob Hope troop was in a hotel next door, and it got satchel charged. The enemy got in there and satchel charged it. So they wanted Bob Hope people the place to stay. So we went out there prior to that, and we had 5 generals' wives acting as our nurses right on General Westmoreland lawn. It's a 2-story log cabin. And General Westmoreland lived in almost like a castle. He's 4-star general in charge of all of Vietnam. Yeah. So the Bob Hope troop came in and gave us a private show, and Anita Bryant, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she's a little redhead, had a voice unbelievable. She came up and kissed me on my cheek. So, but next day, they came up and says, "All the ambulatory put on you, gowns, and all the bed patients will be carried out on stretchers." Wonder what's up now. We got up there, and there was about 10 picnic tables lined up end to end with the benches on them. And General Westmoreland sat here. His wife sat to his right. Right across from them was another general, and then another general here. And then I had the 5th general was one that, while I was in the hospital in Vietnam, he came there every day. He was on his way by to visit his wife, who was on the same floor. Well, he looked down and saw my name on my tag on Bob Scott. His name was Scott, last name, Brigadier General Scott. He had a 6-pack of bud. He came in and sat there and talked to me till we killed a 6-pack of bud. Every day I was there. So, and then I went over and met him back to the States. When I got through flying my third tour over there, I hitchhiked a ride. I got emergency leave because my wife was having a hard time mentally and everything else. So I got an emergency leave and came back to the States. Well, the only thing leaving was a C-5A. That's one with 8 engines, 2 here on the pod and 2 here on the pod, 8 engines. And down where the cargo hold was, we had 160 loading caskets with a barrier between, the rope barrier between where I was sitting and them. And then about 8 feet above me was the sleeping quarters where they had about 6 bunks. and then you climb up another about 8 feet, and you're in the cockpit. In other words, when you're sitting in the cockpit on the ground, you can be looking out a 2-story window. That's big, big bird. So we took off and flew to Manila, and the 2 majors that was supposed to be flying co-pilot with these colonels went out and got the equivalent of Montezuma's Revenge. Do you know what that is?
Yes, sir.
Well, got that. Came back and they're up there on the sleeping deck, moaning and groaning. And I heard, "Mr. Scott." And I yelled, "Yes, sir." "You flew Boeing, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, sir, Boeing Berthold." He said, "You had to keep the engine trim right." I said, "Yes, sir." It's up here. So I climbed up, got in the cockpit. I said, "Now, sir, what you want me to do?" He said, "Your primary job is to keep up all 8 of those engines tacking at the same amount, power into them." So I said, "I can do that." He said, "And the second thing, every time we pass through from one zone to the other, like you're going to calling Jacksonville Center, and then you get up around South Carolina, you call another one. But there, every about 6 hours or so, you'd change." And so I got in with him in Manila and flew co-pilot with him all the way back to Anchorage, Alaska. The lieutenant colonel was flying the next leg with the major, and the major's still sick as he could be. I said, "Mr. Scott," I said, "Yes, sir, I'll be there." So I knew what he wanted. So I climbed up there and got in the cockpit. And I said, "Now, sir, I flew all night last night. I might fall asleep on you." He says, "You do, I'll give you one of these." So I dozed off in about the first 10 hours. I dozed off, and I felt him shake me. One of the engines without a trim. So I had to trim that. And we're getting ready to cross into a new boundary on the radios, so I had to tune the radios. Fell back asleep. Just about 90 miles northwest of Toronto. You know what the flaps are? Where you're landing and taking off? C-5A has one about as wide as me to you and about like this building. Well, anyway, it left the aircraft. And here we are like that. So he compensated for it. He said, "Look out there and see what you see." I said, "Well, sir, I don't see a flap." And he said, "Oh." So we flew on in, and we were going into New Haven, Connecticut. So we got just about there, and he called him, told him what his problem was, that he was going to go out over the Atlantic and dump fuel and have just enough to make it back, because he didn't want fuel with that heavy loaded bird, and we had to touch down at flying speed, 465 knots. So, and you can't come down and let the flaps down to slow up, because you flip over. So he greased that thing. He touched down right on the numbers. Couldn't even feel him touch ground. Got on his brakes and blew 6 tires out. All the way down, and they'd foamed the runway and everything. All the way to the end of the runway, the nose gear popped off the end of the runway. So then I caught the north-south ferry. The Navy had a white helicopter that flew all the way down the East Coast. They'd stop at every military base, let guys off, and pick up others. And so I stayed with them all the way to Fort Benning, Georgia. So that's another story I'm sticking to. Yeah. Left him to go back to Fort Walters, Texas for a while, and got my discharge from there with 22 years plus. But I ended up flying him. Within the first month and a half, I had my first Distinguished Flying Cross. My second one I got during Tet 68 for wounded, hauling 67 wounded Marines plus infantry, South Vietnamese infantry from Way City down to Da Nang to the aid station. So then what I got also while I was flying in Vietnam is 31 air medals, and I also received the Vietnam's Gallantry Cross. Gallantry Cross is like our Distinguished Flying Cross, and mine was a Gold Star Division level. And that's the highest ranking star award. That's like our congressional. And so I got that, and flew 750 combat missions, and ended up with 31 air medals and 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses plus some Vietnamese Flying Crosses. I got sent back to Fort Eustis, Virginia for my 3rd tour duty there, working with students and working with instructor pilots, giving them the annual evaluation ride, and students their evaluation rides to see if they can go one phase of training to the next. And I did that until I think it was October 1968, and a young first lieutenant came out to the ship. He said, "Bob, I'm flying with you today." I had my name tag, Bob Scott. So I said, "Well, you're just getting out of MOI? That's Methods of Instructing." He said, "Yep." I said, "Well, we're going to go out here and go through all of the things that they taught you there. See how well you do." Did everything great until it got to the 180-yard rotation. That's where you're flying downwind at 500 feet, cut the throttle and do a 180 and back down and land on the runway. And you're supposed to land and not skid over about 4 or 5 feet, because we were out on desert red boulders as big as this round, up to 20 feet high. You can imagine what happened if you skidded too far there. And we also taught our rotations to sandbars in the Brazos River. So you can imagine the sandbars and how big they were. So anyway, I said, "Let me show you how it's done." Climbed out, downwind leg, just getting ready to enter my auto rotation. The aircraft turned 90 degrees in the air, and the nose dropped low. I knew I lost something back there, because you tell rotors you weight and balance. Because we had 2 people in the cockpit, and that far back, you balance us out. And I immediately rolled the throttle off, and it back on, and pulled in pitch. Well, the engine was idling, and that's all I could get out of it, but pull pitch and blades and get lift on it, and then roll it off. Pitch down, pitch up. In other words, torque, anti-torque, torque, anti-torque. Right down to the ground, landed it. You could have put a carton of eggs on the skids. The tower had seen it leave the aircraft. They had the fire truck over to put the crash fire out. Just sitting there waiting. Here, I put it down. So I talked to tower people later. They said when that blade left the aircraft, it went about 400 yards and landed right in the middle of the Brazos River. So went in. The commanding general at that time was the General Leo Suchek. And Leo and I were he was in B Company 227, and I was in A Company, but we flew a lot together. So he called me into his office, and I saluted. I said, "What's up, Leo?" To a general, and I'm a W-3 He laughed, and he says, "We're going to have a little parade for you Thursday, and I want you to be there at my office, 8 o'clock, and you'll ride down with me." I didn't know what we were going to do. Then this little portly guy, about as big around as he was tall, about 5 foot tall, walked out and took the mic, and he's talking on it. And he's talking about this warrant officer landed a helicopter without a tail rotor. Well, I knew he was talking about me, but I didn't know what was up. He said, "Mr. Scott, come out here." So I went out, and this little broken wing here, he pinned that on me. Which aviators, that's the one you want to get over any combat one. Because that's when you're such an immediate danger. And he says, by the way, as far as we've checked, you're the only man in the world that ever walked away from one of them.
Wow.
So I got a pretty prestigious award there. And then shortly after that, in fact, 8 days after that, I was discharged from the Army with 22 and a half years in. Well, 22 and a half total years in.
Right, the
Yeah.
Army and Navy.
Yeah. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
No, you went from place to place. The only reason why I think that is because you said, I went and did something, I signed up for something, and I didn't tell my wife before I did it. That's what,
Well,
that
that
was
was-
the key,
that-
because I've never done that in my life. So I was just wondering how'd that work out for you?
That was flight school.
Uh-huh.
She said, well, if that's what you want to do. Because she knew I'd come out of that as a warrant officer with a lot more pay plus flight pay. In fact, my pay more than doubled. Believe it or not, we married 64 years and 4 months. Never had an argument. You know why? The night I got married, my dad said, Bob, you ever see your mother and I argue? I said, no, I haven't. He says, there's 5 words, and you won't ever have an argument. Yes, dear, you're right, dear. So every time she get that Italian temper up, Italian-German, her mother is German side.
Make this stuff.
Yes, you're right there.
But she get that temper up, and I'd say, yes, dear, you're right, dear, and go out and piddle around the garage or mow some grass or something. Give her about a half an hour to cool off, go back in, and everything's okay.